I think one of the things that our parents taught us through the hard lessons was you're never going to be fully prepared to do what God asks you to do.
Absolutely.
And you kind of have to embrace those spontaneous moments. You're forced out of your comfort zone. You're forced out of your preparation, mindset. And then realizing that you don't die afterwards. You learn perseverance through all those things.
Everyone gets in their own lane of feeling stretched. The beautiful thing about those moments is it actually pushes you back into faith. Because you get to a point where you're like, either God's going to come through or like, I'm going to die. And then when you don't die and you come out on the other side, all that does is it strengthens you and you're like, wow.
Hey friends, welcome to the Paulcast. I'm here with my brother, John Daugherty, and we're going to be talking all things about just growing up as pastors' kids together in this church, as well as working together as brothers, and just all about what we talk about on this podcast: life, fatherhood, just ministry, and everything that goes behind the scenes at Victory, and everything that God's been doing in our church and kind of just speaking from the pulpit. And so I want to just turn it to my brother, John, let him talk a little bit, tell you who he is if you haven't heard a little bit of his story. So, John, tell everyone who you are.
I am the other brother, period. I'm just kidding. No, but I am his only brother. Thank you for listening to the John Cast, and welcome to, I'm just kidding. But real quick, who came up with Paulcast?
I did.
I love it. Don't you guys love it? All of those who, if this is your first time to tune into the Paulcast, just comment, hey, I really love the name of this podcast. It would really make him feel good. Anyways, so I am John. I get to serve here with my brother, under my brother. He is my pastor. He is my boss. He's also my younger brother. I get to serve as the creative pastor here. We get to do, along with the people who are helping produce this current Paulcast, I get to work with a really awesome group of people, from productions to services to campuses to anything's creative. And then I also get to coach at the school. I have 3 kids, and we were born here in an offering bucket. My mom gave birth in an offering bucket and had to plug the hole so it wouldn't leak out the bottom of it. I'm just kidding.
Goodness.
But anyways, my mom did throw up during a Victory conference in a offering bucket, and it was leaking out the hole. That's a true story.
Yeah.
And the ushers had to put a finger underneath the bottom of the offering
gum
bucket.
Or something. They did something to try to block the throw up from.
I think that I've told this to Paul. I was like, I feel like Victory is built on faith and then cringy stories.
Yes.
For 40 years. I mean, there's only, if those of you who do not know, Victory has a Victory College, a Victory School. We have a camp. We have 2 Dream Centers, one out north, one at west. And then we have our main central campus. And then we have Victory Manford and Victory North. So it is a large thing. And I've always wondered, the only way for this to continue going forward is not just on Pastor Paul and Pastor Ashley.
It's a team of people. And
yes. Well, I was going to say God.
Well, yeah, it's
God has really done a lot of amazing things that, we can't take credit for. But Paul and Ashley have led the ship so well. And that's why I'm still here. So I love it.
Well, I was going to say this. Obviously, God, for sure, is the one that has done what he's done through Victory. But the team of people, and you do a podcast about the team that works behind the scenes. What's the name of your podcast?
It's called Behind the Scenes of Our Best Days. So at Victory, whether it's a chapel or a youth service, we always start off with a confession. And it's within the confession, there's these words: I'm here on purpose because I have a purpose. And, but within it says, and my best days are right in front of me. Well, to be real, everyone has a behind the scenes of their best days, right? Because you post the best days. When you meet friends that you haven't seen in a while, you talk about your best days. You're like, oh, we just got this. We just got Junior neutered. Junior is not a kid, it's a dog. But anyways, but whatever. You just kind of talk about your best days. But the true behind the scenes of best days, we kind of, within our podcast, we talk about the behind the scenes of the ministries at Victory. The funny things, the sad things, the meaningful things. So anyways, I do it with Arvin Sepper, who also gets to serve here at Victory. So it's great. Okay, so I wanted to ask you, being in the summer, we're recording this podcast 2024 in the summer. What are you the most excited about right now in your personal life?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and I have obviously, for those that watch this, listen to this, you can see John and I are totally different personalities. But the thing I love about John is he's going to make you laugh. He's going to make you, in some ways, those stories will make you throw up when you start thinking about what he's saying there.
Yeah.
But I love that we get to do this together as brothers. And I love that we both grew up in this world. We both kind of know those cringy stories, and they've shaped us and who we are. I would say in this current season, I'm looking forward to spending the summer with our family. The kids are out of school. We got 5 kids. You got 3 kids. Just making memories with the kids, whether it's fishing or swimming or going to the park or bike rides, going out to Camp Victory. I'm looking forward to all the summer stuff. And our family, we try to pull away for a couple weeks just to make memories together, and we'll do a trip with you guys. We always go to Branson every summer.
If you guys are not from America, if you're listening or watching and you are not from the middle of America, there is a place called Branson.
Yeah.
It is Vegas for senior citizens.
Yes,
kind of.
Branson is, we've been going there since we were babies. So
Yeah.
our parents took us there when we were little, went to a place called Silver Dollar City.
Come on.
And we still go there. And this is like, John and I are in our late 30s.
I actually turned 40
John turns 40 this
in
summer.
3 weeks.
Come on, bro. We're going to talk about that in a second. But I look forward to that trip. I look forward to that trip together as like family. So we'll go, me and John, our 2 older sisters, all their kids, our kids, and my mom. And we'll spend 3 or 4 days in Branson. We'll do like Silver Dollar City, Dixie Stampede. These are like John said, it's Vegas for who?
Senior citizens
Senior
or
citizens.
Christians.
There's no casinos. It's just
there's
shows.
Yeah. There's no casinos, but it's like shows. Every billboard, people are smiling. Every billboard.
It's a little creepy.
It is. And I was trying to pinpoint. I was like, why is Branson, if you have not been there and you go, where am I? Because it's in the middle of the Ozark Mountains, and there's all of these shows, like Broadway shows, except for the youngest person in the show is 50 years old. And it's between the age of 50
the poster boards are
but the poster boards,
it's a certain demographic.
It's a certain demographic. The poster boards that are promoting these big Broadway shows that they put thousands and thousands of dollars into it. All of the actors are smiling, and they've been airbrushed their smile. So you're like, is this a Goosebumps episode? Like, it just feels a little unnerving. But when you're there, you're like, okay, it does have a wonderful charm.
Yeah, and
we
it's
love
an
it.
Interesting, funny charm, and we've been going for how many? Like since we were babies.
Yeah,
every summer we've never missed Branson.
Yeah, my dad was like, "We're going," and you'll hear them playing Christian music.
They have a lot of Christian shows.
Yeah,
like
a lot of
Noah,
Christian shows.
Moses,
It's cool.
The Passion.
We just did a plug. So Branson, we love. Thank you for being our
Pay us,
sponsor.
Branson. Sponsored by Branson.
Sponsored by
Paulcast.
Branson. Okay, so growing up, we were talking about our dad would take us to Branson. Also, growing up in ministry, it was just interesting because our dad was very conservative, straight-laced, wore a suit for most of his life.
Rarely ever watched movies.
Rarely watched movies.
I still remember my kids asked me, what movies did you watch with your dad? And I'm like, there was probably only 10 we watched with him.
Swiss Family Robinson.
Most of the movies we watched with our mom.
Yes.
And our dad would walk through and be like, uh-oh,
Yeah, if there was a woman with a backless dress, he was like, this is not us. That was one thing he said. Everything that was bad, he would go, this is not us.
Yeah.
And so whenever someone is just like, hey, your DoorDash is going to be late, I go, this is not us. Because I rebuke that in the name of Jesus. But anyways, I've copied and pasted several things that my dad has said.
Well, so our dad started the church in 81, and our mom was the worship leader. Our dad was the pastor, and then me and my brother and older sisters, we all served. When you're pastor's kids, you're free labor. You just work for the church. And we served in children's church, youth, young adults, J-High, and then in other capacities, whether it was media or productions. We used to, every summer we used to do a 4th of July production.
Right.
And we would be a part of like all kinds of different America flag songs.
You danced.
Yeah, I was part of a dance team, hip-hop dance.
Yeah, and if you guys would go, I didn't know Pastor Paul could dance, you're absolutely right. Continue.
John would laugh at me during those dances. But no, I just think growing up in that world, and our church was like large. By the time we were born, there was thousands of people already coming.
Yeah.
And then it kept growing, and it was renting out this big arena in our city called the Maybe Center. You and me, we would climb up in the rafters of the Maybe
Center.
And we would look down on people, and sometimes we would drop things.
Yeah.
Like food, we would coins, try to like
a Cheez-It.
just drop it into their purse.
Or if a guy had his Bible open, we'd try to like bookmark by dropping it from the catwalk.
Oh.
Another thing that I realized was, people have said, so we do productions currently at Victory.
Yes.
We do Easter, Christmas. Sometimes we'll do a fall film. And people have said, oh, did you go to school for that? And I was like, no, I actually didn't even watch YouTube. We grew up because my dad was like, you guys are going to serve in children's church. Our sisters were the kids pastors. And so every Sunday they were like, skits. John and Paul, you're doing a skit for offering.
Yeah.
You're doing a skit for the memory verse.
What was one of our skits we did?
Exercise, man. And I would come out in a fat suit and I would be like, I am exercise man. And I'm here to pump you up. And we would do memory verse calisthenics. And then we would do sock puppets who would talk like this.
We also did our own revivals in neighborhoods. Where
we would call them revivals and 5 people would show up.
We would show up in a neighborhood.
And we would make posters.
We'd make posters and say, join us for the revival.
And it was in June, 100 degrees. And we'd go, it's in the park under the swing set. And we were so upset whenever we would go canvassing. Also, canvassing, that's a word that we use that no other humans use.
It means going door to door, inviting people to your revival.
I said canvassing to someone, and they go, do you mean painting? And I go, no, canvassing, like where you go out and you invite people to a revival. And they go, what are you talking about? We would canvass and invite people to our revivals. We were 6th graders, and
we would paint our faces.
We would paint our faces as clowns.
We would do mimery. Listen, no, we would do all this stuff. We got to get serious on this Paulcast for a second.
Why?
I don't know, because we want people to remember some good stuff too.
This is okay. Here's the thing. This is the thing that you can take away from this is that if you raise your kids in ministry and they are forced to do skits, yeah, you're going to end up like this. And they're forced to do skits, and basically what our parents did is they were like, we're going to have our kids do life with us.
Yeah.
Because we grew up.
I don't know if the cameras can catch it, but I got a collage of some of our family pictures growing up
on the wall. And so anyways, I do think it is important that if you are a parent and you're raising kids, growing up, there were pastors who were never at home with their kids because they were like, oh, I'm so busy doing ministry. And my parents were like, y'all are coming with.
We're always doing stuff together.
So we always did stuff together. So
summers were full of either going to Branson or going on a missions trip to Haiti or Ireland or Singapore.
By the time we were 14, we'd been to more countries than we had states.
Yeah, because we would go to we would do a missions trip.
We would run a
Other
tape
people
table.
Went to vacation in Jamaica to vacation.
We would go to the slums of Jamaica.
And we were doing a mission trip in Jamaica, not in the pretty part, but in like you said, it's pretty, but you're more in like the impoverished area.
Right.
So when people said they went on like vacation to Dominican Republic, I'm like, wait, what? There's vacation places there?
Yeah. Whenever people were like, oh, did you guys go to the resort? And we were like, there's a resort?
Yeah, we were always doing mission trips to these countries.
I remember when I was in 9th grade and my parents were going to Sierra Leone, Africa, to Guinea-Bissau and the Ivory Coast. It was in the middle of that movie Blood Diamond. It came out a few years ago.
Civil War.
The Civil War. It was during that, and they were mutilating people. They were cutting off their arms because
not our parents,
not my mom and dad. They were going there to do healing crusades in ministry and to plant a Bible school.
Yes.
And they were like, hey, we're going to go. Now, there is a war between the government and a what am I trying to say?
It was
a
rebels.
rebel.
It was like rebels that wanted to overthrow the government and there was a dictator, and they were like, no, we may not come back. We might die.
I was in 9th grade.
And I was like, wait, what am I not going to see? Because I was on another mission trip.
Right.
And I only took you.
And they only took me. And in my mind, I was like, oh, we're going to Africa. I've seen Lion King. I'm about to go on a safari. And then we get there, and everyone has machine guns. There's no lions. I didn't even see a giraffe. And I was like, what is this? When are we going to the safari? And they go, well, this morning we're teaching in the Bible school, and there's gunshots going off. And I'm like, okay. And they go, tonight's the healing crusade. I go, what am I do? What am I going to do? And my parents were like, you are going to go with these people in the van. You're going to do, you're going to visit the villages and preach to the kids.
Yeah.
And I go, I'm in 9th grade.
Yeah.
None of these people speak English. I am leaving you guys during a civil war. This was day one. And in 9th grade, I remember looking out the back of a van, crying and waving to my parents as my parents were like, we'll see you tonight at the Healing Crusade. And I went out to the mountains of Africa, and they were like,
this is a movie, bro.
Yeah. And the interpreter was like, you are very brave. And I was like, I am not brave. I have bad parents that are making me go preach to children that I don't know. They spoke Creole. All right.
Yeah.
And so which is broken English. It's like Spanish. It's what they speak in Louisiana, Deep Bayou.
Yeah.
But it's like kind of French. Yeah. So anyways, we would go, and I remember being there, and all of these people from the village came, and they were amputee villages, which means these people had their limbs cut off. And then I remember crying, and then the guy was like, you have to preach because we have to be at the next village in an hour. And so I was like, okay. So I would preach as a 9th grader, and then he would interpret, and then we'd go to the next village. And I remember that happened 3 times. We ate lunch. It was like a mayonnaise sandwich. And then we got back, and my parents were like, how was it today? And I remember crying and being like, I can't do this anymore. And my dad was like, it's only 5 more days. And I was like, and anyways, so growing up, but those
we
times
learned how to do the hard, crazy
we
stuff.
learned. And so when anyone, like, for instance, there was a moment a few years ago when people were like, hey, it was in the middle of a conference, and they were like, hey, the person who is going to MC got sick. Can you do it? Most people would freak out. But whenever they asked me, I'm like, I'll do it. Give me the mic. What am I doing? Does that make sense?
Yes.
But that doesn't come naturally. That comes from being in Sierra Leone in nude amputee villages as a 9th grader doing crazy things. But I would not have been there if it wasn't for our parents. And some of you guys, some people who are modern thinking, they're like, that's abuse. To me, that was the best parenting. Because I was like, no one could throw anything at me at the age of 17 that I haven't seen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it really built confidence because it broke me it broke me down first.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
Anyways.
You learn, I think one of the things that our parents taught us through the hard lessons was, one, that you're never going to be fully prepared to do what God asks you to do.
Absolutely.
And you kind of have to embrace those spontaneous moments. You're forced out of your comfort zone. You're forced out of your preparation, mindset. And then realizing that you don't die afterwards. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You learn perseverance through all those things. And I just think it's interesting looking back on those stories and then seeing who we are today, what we, get to carry, what we really have to carry, the responsibility of the ministry and all those things prepared us back then. It was almost like God was using all of those quirky, crazy, wild, and probably even like stretching moments for us to do what we're doing today.
Absolutely.
So,
I think one thing that also helps is those of you who are listening and watching, you may not be in this situation, but maybe you are in a ministry and you have felt like, oh my goodness, how am I going to pay the staff this week? Maybe you're like, or maybe you're a stay-at-home dad, or maybe you're a mom that's running 2 businesses while raising kids. Everyone gets in their own lane of feeling stretched. And the one thing that, like, the beautiful thing about those moments is it actually pushes you back into faith.
Yeah.
Because you get to a point to where you're like, either God's going to come through or, like, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And then when you don't die and you come out on the other side, all that does is it strengthens you, and you're like, wow. That's why it's wild to me how people can do life without God. I'm like, how do you even do it?
Yeah.
Like, you know, and we have heard unfortunate stories of people who have taken their lives because they thought, I'm in over my head, or maybe they've had a chemical imbalance and they've stooped into a depression of certain things that are, and my encouragement to those who are listening and watching, and those who regularly tune into the Paulcast, is, first off, is that God will not give you anything more than what you can handle.
Yeah.
You know, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. That's a scripture in the Bible. And so, yes, there is a burden. Yes, there is a yoke, but it's easy. So if it's hard, it's not from God. And you may be personally taking on things that God never asked you to pick up. That's why it's heavy.
Or carrying it with a mindset of worry and stress, which
Worry
isn't
and
from
stress.
God.
Absolutely.
Because, like, ministry is a burden, but it's not meant to it's not meant to kill you to the degree of, like I heard it like this once, saying that we're supposed to die daily to ourselves. That's a scripture, you know. But what we're not supposed to do is die in the purpose of what God's called us to do from our own doing, like our own worry, our own stress. Cancer grows where there's worry and stress.
Yeah.
Depression grows where people don't pull God into their story, and or they have God in their story, but they're not remembering the tools God gave them to get through the hard season. Like, you think about Elijah, he had God, but he was still suicidal. You can have Jesus in your heart and Jezebel in your head. You can have...
Oh, that's good. I hope you... Hold on. Say that one more time. I hope y'all wrote that down.
You can have Jesus in your heart. For Elijah, he was God's biggest prophet in the Old Testament, and even mentions in the New Testament that God pulled Elijah out with horses of fire for a purpose. People think he's going to, show up in the book of Revelation as one of the two witnesses. But the thing was Elijah knew God. You can have Jesus in your heart, but he was intimidated by Jezebel. Jezebel said, I'm going to kill you if I find you. Well, she wasn't anywhere close to him, but he runs 400 miles into the wilderness with depression, worry, stress, fear.
All of it was in his head.
Intimidation, isolation. He gets away from communities. Like,
Yeah.
I'm all alone in the ministry. That's not God's calling. God calls us into ministry. We will face Jezebels. We will face hard times. We will face people who don't like us. We will face people who betray us. We'll make our own mistakes. But in the midst of that, if we can still continue to go, okay, God, you're going to get me through this.
Right.
God, you're going to give me peace that passes understanding. God, you're going to help me not live in the feelings of depression and sense of hopelessness. That's why we say in our confession, my best days are still in front of me. God's not finished yet. To remind people, no matter how dark it looks, you and I have both walked through dark seasons. In fact, one thing I'll say on this podcast, in seasons in my own life where I have faced my deepest feelings of discouragement, my brother John has been probably right there in the top 3 biggest encouragers in my life. And people that's like, Paul, God's not finished. Your best days are still in front of you.
Yeah.
You're going to get through this, light at the end of the tunnel. And I just think about, like, what a gift it is to have an older brother alongside of me in the ministry. Not many guys in the church world, around the world, not just in America, but around the world, get to work with a sibling that they grew up with and a sibling that genuinely loves them.
Why do you think that is?
I think there's so much sibling rivalry in general, not just in ministry, but in business. I mean, there's TV shows about it, Succession, all that stuff. But I think naturally siblings fight with each other. Jacob and Esau, Isaac and Ishmael, even Abraham and Lot. Relatives sometimes get into such a competitive spirit they can't work together. You have done an amazing job walking in humility and confidence, working with your brother, and building something awesome here together. Like, you could have done your own thing. You could have gone off and built your own ministry or gone into production company, started your own thing, but you've poured into this house. You've built an amazing ministry through Victory in what you do, and you've touched so many people's lives without having to be in the lead role and still be a great leader. And I think sometimes siblings don't work together because siblings all either want to be in that main role or they don't know how to navigate
It's
that.
hard to navigate because, thank you for saying that, Paul, I love you.
I love you too.
Can you touch me? Those of you who are listening, we're touching hands. Anyways, clarity. Okay. Thank you for saying that. I just knew, whenever, first off, I feel like it would be terrifying for me, John, to be a lead pastor. I just feel like I am not wired that way. And so I think that some people are not honest with themselves. They see things that they go, oh, that would be nice. I would love to be an entrepreneur. Honey, you ain't got the goods. And if you don't have the goods to be an entrepreneur, don't be an entrepreneur. And I think that in, this is not in the Bible, but there's a great quote, know thyself. I do believe people refuse to know themselves. And so they see something and they go, oh my gosh, look at Paul on stage preaching. Look at Pastor Mike Todd on stage with those awesome illustrations. Look at Paul singing and doing this. Look at Stephen Furtick with those cool clothes and those shoes. I want that. And I'm like, you do not have the structure within yourself to handle the stresses that they are under. The stage isn't even 10% of what Paul does. You guys see Paul on this podcast and on the stage. What he does in the meetings throughout the week while being a husband, while being a father, and not a crappy dad, not a crappy husband, but a good one. Because you can actually be awesome, an awesome man of God, and be a bad dad. All right? There's hundreds of stories. You can be an awesome person of God and be a bad husband. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyways, to see that, I think Paul leads very well in that way, and it makes it easy to follow that. But all that to say, I truly believe that those of you listening and watching, it is okay to ask God, what have you specifically designed me at? Where's my zone? What's my lane?
And that takes time to figure out.
And it does. And I remember I was the junior high youth pastor, and Paul was over our young adult group. I was junior high youth pastor, and I ran our bus ministry. Our junior high youth had like 120 kids. In this room today, we have one of our producer people, Samantha Applegate. She was in that youth group. And it's crazy. Now she's married to Cody. They're doing great. But anyways, she was in that youth group. I was the junior high youth pastor. At that time, my brother, Paul, and Ashley were over young adults. And young adults at that time had to have 2 services because there were so many people showing up. And everyone was like, how does it feel? And I was like, and I remember it was called 3D, our young adult ministry. I remember going to 3D, and it was packed with like super cool young adults. I had junior high students that would still have the hanger in their shirts and wear it, and then like boogers coming out of their nose, and like Cheeto fingers and Kool-Aid stains on their teeth. And I was like, I have so many uncool kids in this youth group. But anyways, and then I would go to 3D, and I was like, dude, this place rocks. And I genuinely, for a month, was super bummed because I was like, I'm the older brother. Like, it would be cool for me to be the young adult pastor. And all my friends are here. They're listening to my younger brother. It was for a month. I felt that. And I was like, I was bummed, and I was jealous. And then after about a month, I don't know what happened. I wish I could tell you like I saw a light from heaven, or someone who was like Yoda said a wise quote and it pulled me out of my humdrum. That didn't happen. All I remember is that I no longer felt that feeling when I was like, oh my goodness, I love these junior high kids, and there's nothing I would rather do than this. And I'm so happy that young adults is blowing up. Well, then my dad passed. when my dad passed, our lead youth pastors went over to help at the big church. Paul went over to help at the big church, and they were like, all right, John, now you're over all of youth, junior high and high school. And I was like, okay. And anyways, so it's just unique how if you just are like, God, there's a reason why I am where I'm currently at.
Yeah.
And maybe whatever you're praying for, those of you who are listening and watching, whatever you're praying for, maybe you don't have the structure to hold it yet.
Yeah.
Imagine you being like, I want to bench press 300 pounds, and you have arms like spaghetti noodles.
Yeah.
If you take that bar off, you're going to die. It's going to crush you. Some of us don't have the structure to hold the things that we're praying for.
And I think it's like more than structure, it's also like only God can place people in certain places. Like,
right.
It's like,
you can't force it.
Yeah, because like I look at things that I've wanted that haven't happened, things that you've wanted that haven't happened. And it's like, sometimes it's not even about, am I wired to do this? Do I have the structure to do this? Sometimes it's like, does God want that to happen? Because if he does, he will help make that happen. And if he doesn't, he's got something good. Even if I'm disappointed that I don't get to do it.
Right.
God.
It's what you said.
God will find something for me.
You said a few moments ago, you said to daily die to yourself.
Daily die.
Not my will, but
thy will be done. Because, yeah, I think, I've shared with you before that I walked through seasons of jealousy towards you and then jealousy in seasons towards another minister. And God has to, like, root that out because that's obviously not from him. Pulls it out of me and shows me the ugly, green monster of envy. But then reminds me, like, you want what they have, but that's not what I've called you to do.
That's good.
And if so then God helps me to see, okay, what has he called me to do? How can I love what he's called me to do? Be content in what he's called me to do and celebrate what other people are doing.
Celebrate. That's a big thing. Celebrating when other people are crushing it and you're like, hey, I want to let you know I see you crushing it and I'm so happy that you're doing that.
Yeah.
And I think the more you get to know yourself and you investigate within,
yes.
Because some people don't like to investigate within and they really seek God. I went through a devastating moment in my life in 2019. I got divorced. And in the church world, that is an odd thing. We sent out an email telling people I got divorced. We sent an email to the whole church. Is that awkward or what? I'm just sorry. Can we just sit there? That was so awkward, but I think it was because so many people were asking
what was happening.
And I feel
there was
like
nothing on social media about it.
Yeah, there was nothing on social media about it. So we sent out an email, and I was still working at the church.
But she was gone.
But yes, and the mother of my children was no longer around. And so, anyways, it was one of those things to where I was completely devastated. It was a dark season in my life. I was like, what am I doing? Now everything that I've ever preached about relationships, no person would ever listen. You know what I mean? Like,
which isn't true.
I know that, but you can't help but
the
think
enemy
that.
makes you feel like
Yes. And then I actually, it was during that first month, I had a previous teen call me, Daniel August. What's up, Daniel? And he said, will you perform my wedding?
Wow.
And I was like, I don't think I can be around weddings right now. And I was like, and are you sure you want me? And I like got emotional thinking about it because I was like, what do I? And he was like, dude, none of that takes. And this was a kid that I was in my youth group.
That's powerful.
Is telling his old youth pastor, he was like, you preached from the Bible, right? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, the word of God doesn't return void. Yeah. And he was like, everything that you preached on is still true. You had a hiccup in your life. I was like, oh, it was a pretty big hiccup. And he was like, he's like, this happened. And he's like, I'm sorry. It sucks for you. I'm so sorry that happened. I still want you to do my wedding because of what you were to me in this season of my life,
Wow.
And doing that wedding, it was like Paul has a sermon about motion activated faith. you have this illustration where you say, when you walk up to a motion activated door at a grocery store, when you step on the pad, even if the door isn't opening, it opens, you know? That was me stepping out and doing it. It was a motion activated of, wait, life is still worth living.
Yeah.
Even not being married. Life is still worth living, and marriage is still a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Marriage is still God's, God's purpose for our life.
And
you know
your
what
gift
I mean?
of preaching didn't stop. It was like the doors opened of you stepping forward to preach, even though you felt in those moments what you felt. It was like God was opening the door saying, your calling hasn't stopped.
Absolutely. But during those moments, again, Paul was very close to me. That was when I really dove into, okay, we went to this really wonderful ministry called Heart Healer. And then we started going to, Spirit-filled Christian counseling. And from then on, I was like, I want to be with a Christian counselor, Spirit-filled. I think that's an important thing,
Yeah, because there's so many counselors that
are good people, but they're not Spirit-filled and they don't understand faith.
Yeah.
So I do believe in therapists. I love them. They're amazing. It is important that you have someone that is Spirit-filled if you are a believer. If you're not a believer, go to whoever you want. If you are a believer, go to a Spirit-filled one, because they understand the science of your brain, your emotions, your soul, but then they understand faith in the Word of God and standing on something even when it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I felt like during those times, you were such an encouragement to me. Anyways, that was a long rabbit trail. Back to what you said about, those moments of God just leading you to where you need to be. Where I'm at today with my children and my relationship with their mother, and where I'm at Victory, I'm like, I would not be here if it wasn't for my brother, the grace of God, and the community here. And there was times where I would try to force things and then it wouldn't happen. But when I allowed God to put me in places where I was supposed to be, it always just worked out better. It was less stressful.
Yeah. Well, I think, man, you dived deep, and I appreciate that, into just your story and your journey. And I think one thing you said that just stands out to me is knowing who you are and knowing what's inside you and knowing knowing the good, bad, and ugly. And that's something you've helped me to see, is like, we grew up so faith-minded that we were always taught to only confess the best, only believe the best, deny anything that's negative. And it's like, the reality is, as humans, we do have some negative things about ourselves. And we all do. Like Moses did, Gideon did, Peter did. The only one who didn't was Jesus. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you also have a institutional reality. That's something Dr. Rutland taught us. But a reality of okay, I'm going to speak faith, but I naturally am not gifted in this area, or I naturally am weak when it comes to doing these things.
Right.
That doesn't mean that I'm not going to speak the word and let the weak say I'm strong, let the poor man say I'm rich.
Yeah.
But I'm also going to be aware that I need help. I
Absolutely.
need a Spirit-filled counselor. I need someone checking up on me. I need someone else to do something I'm not gifted to do, and I can celebrate and trust them to do it. And that's something that I've had to learn, is that as stepping into this role at a young age, you've taught me, Paul, don't be afraid of the negative feedback that can help you in your blind spots. And don't think that your opinion is always correct about an area that you may not be the most knowledgeable or skilled or gifted in. And that's hard, because as
You're
leaders,
the boss.
Well, but also as leaders in this day and age, you feel like if you don't have the answer, sometimes people can go, well, you're not qualified if you can't, lead this, or if you don't have the answer to that. Or especially when Ashton and I stepped in, there was such an older generational pressure that was
You got to be like Billy Joe.
Got to be like Billy Joe, and Billy Joe knew everything, did everything. He was unintentionally, he was a great micromanager. What, intentionally or unintentionally, he had his hand in everything. He had an opinion on everything. He was known as kind of like the Superman. Like, he had the answer for whatever, Camp Victory or the school or the football program or whatever. And And honestly, I think I learned sooner in those first few years, like, I really need to take my hands off and let people like you do what you're gifted to do. Because we would butt heads, and I would be like, why do I want to get so into the weeds on something that I should just trust other people to do that are gifted in those areas? And doesn't mean I'm a bad leader. It means I'm learning to trust other people to do their job well. And I do think it came from, like you said, the pressure to be like our dad, who always had his hand in everything, was
To
in
be the
weeds.
be-all, end-all.
Yeah. So anyways, I know we're getting into the weeds.
No. I actually love I'm looking around the people in this room who are currently helping out with the podcast. 4 years ago, I micromanaged a lot of them, and I would text them and be like, the Twitter has a misspelling. Can you please blah, 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 blah. The Instagram, one of the swipe throughs is a dark image. Can you please, being over. And now I feel, have I gotten better? Okay, good. I was about to say something good about myself, and I was like, right? But I feel like anyone who is human automatically does that.
Yes.
One thing that you helped me do is when I have something in my mind, and we'll wrap up in just a moment. You guys hold on. I can sense you guys through the camera being like, wrap this up. Chill.
I think people love it.
Yeah, but we're going to call up the keys right now. Okay, sorry. Side note, during a victory conference, it was a word explosion at Maybe Center.
Yeah.
We were there. A guy named Tim Story, who was a famous speaker back in the 90s, he preached, did an altar call. He called up the keys. He brought his own keys guy. And the keys guy, he sang, "You are not alone, and I am here with you."
People may not know this song, so tell them. This is not a Christian song.
This is a Michael Jackson song.
At
You are
the
not
altar
alone.
call.
At the altar. And I am weeping with my hands up. I'm like, though you're not afraid. You know how Michael Jackson does all this. And
our first Michael Jackson
that was our
song
first
we were
Michael
introduced
Jackson.
to was Free Willy.
Free Willy. Carry me like the river Jordan. Okay, we started off on different octaves. Another thing we were forced to do is we were forced to sing duets. Father's Day, Mother's Day, and Christmas Eve.
We would cover Josh Groban.
We would cover Josh Groban, NSYNC, Music of My Heart with Gloria Estefan. We should stop trying to hop in together on the same octave.
You raise me up
we raised so many people up on Father's Day and Mother's Day singing Josh Groban songs or Avalon. These old CCM songs. My mom would force us to sing. All of my siblings sang except for me.
No, you sang.
All of you led worship except for me. So they were used to singing on the phone or singing. What am I saying? Singing on the microphone. I forgot the words every time, and I would literally sing, "I forgot the words." And then people would laugh, and they'd be like, "John is so funny." And afterwards, I would cry because I was like, this is true, right?
Yes.
See? He says stop, but I'm like telling the truth. Anyways, micromanaging. One thing that you helped me do is you helped me not be offended when, like for me, I would attach my identity to what I created. Anyone else out there, if you do graphic design or video, or you are designing a shirt for your church, or you're designing something, if you are creative and you work at a church, you usually, if you want to find super bitter people, go to the sound booth and talk to the sound men at a church, or talk to the creative team at a church, because those bitter people, they've heard the sermon 4 times. They're making sermon quotes. I don't know why I keep on doing this. They're making sermon quotes. The sound men, all they want is good equipment. They've heard the sermon also 3 times. And usually that is a birthplace for bitterness. To me, we are so blessed here. That is not the case at Victory. But I've interacted with so many other creative people that are like, I never want to work at a church again. And I'm like, why? Because you've attached your identity to something that you created, and then your pastor said, I don't like this. Let's make it Den font instead of Times New Roman. And you go, ugh. Does that sound familiar to any of you creatives listening? That would happen with me and Paul.
Helvetica font,
Helvetica.
all caps.
Papyrus. But that would happen with me and Paul when it came to our productions.
Yeah.
I would put so much effort into something within our production. Paul would come to our dress rehearsal and he would say, all right, tomorrow's the opening night. We can't have girls dancing on a table in this number because it looks inappropriate. And I'm like, what? And then he was like,
Context.
and he's like, the context of this, whenever we do productions, we do dances, we do musicals, it's partial film, it's partial on stage. We do a bunch of different, sometimes the dances unintentionally would come off as provocative. And I'm like, oh, this is great art. And he's like, okay, let's put them on the floor. And I'm like, why? And he's like, because they're wearing skirts and they're up on a table and everyone is sitting lower. And I'm like, oh. But initially I would get offended and I would be like, you don't understand art. That would be our arguments, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could call them arguments. Anyways, the arguments that we would get into would be, I would think he doesn't understand artistic expression and this is what everyone is doing. That would be my argument. I feel like recently it's gotten better.
Oh, 100%.
I usually am ready for Paul to be like, hey, we need to talk about this one musical number, or hey, there's this line that this person says. Instead of saying that, can we say this? And it has been something that has really helped me release perfection, or release John's idea. Because at the end of the day, if you are working at a church, the best idea should win, not John's idea. And if I think that the best idea is always mine, then the ceiling is going to hit me.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to get any better. If you take that approach, then it's like, okay, best idea wins, even if it's not from me. It helps promote a culture where ideas are welcome, including your pastor's idea.
Yeah.
And so anyways, that's something that you've helped me grow in.
Well, and I do think like something that I've had to grow into is understanding the role that I sit in is there is a side of my role that's like gatekeeper role. Like
Right.
Who I invite to come preach here, at the end of the day, they could fly in, fly out, but I live with the consequences of what they say and how they treat our church and
Yeah.
what happens from that pulpit. It's like if I open the gate to someone who no longer believes in hell and they preach from stage, everybody's going to heaven and there is no hell.
And all of a sudden you're gripping the chair.
Oh, yeah. People get mad at that guy, but they'll be like, why did our pastor have someone come that's theologically
You're held
different than us?
responsible.
And I think something you and I have learned is like the arts is amazing and the arts absolutely needs a place in the church. How do we make sure the arts, if it was a guest speaker weekend and we picture like the arts is the guest speaker this weekend, how do we make sure the arts complements the theology of the house?
Yes.
And doesn't contradict what's being preached on a weekly basis? How do we make sure those work together? And for those who work for a church, if you see your pastor as a gatekeeper and you see the week that you do Easter, Christmas, or a film,
or a design for a series or a bumper intro,
working together to go, how do I make sure that we're in alignment here? I'm going to use my gifts that are different than yours, Pastor. And you've done a great job working through that to go, hey, we both want the same thing. We want lives to be impacted.
Yeah, bottom
we
line
want
is
people
we
to
want
be saved,
to be
touched
saved,
by the presence of
salvations.
God, recommit their lives to Jesus, and we want the arts to remind them how big God is in the
Yes.
story of Easter, Christmas, or film or whatever. But before we close out today, something I was going to say on this podcast with you is I think there's people out there that watch this, listen to this, that want to work either with a family member, a relative, or someone that they've known for a long time. There is a beauty, because sometimes I've heard pastors say you should never work with family or never work with close friends because it has so much potential to go south. And in my mind, I'm like, there is such a beauty in working with someone who you have built a long-term relationship with. If it could be a brother, a sister, or if it could be a best friend, there is a beauty in that. And I do think that there's a lot of leaders who are leading from a cold place, a calloused place. a non-approachable, I can't make friends with people because it's lonely at the top. It doesn't have to be lonely at the top.
Right.
You don't have to be all alone at the top of a mountain. You could be with a group of friends. You could be with your brother. Someone recently asked me, they were like, how is it working with your brother? And I'm like, man, it's a blessing. Like, I'm so thankful. John keeps me laughing. Are there times that we might butt heads? Of course. Like, that's part of working with your brother. But at the same time, like, we've learned to work through that. We've learned to keep on getting better, sharpening each other. As iron sharpens iron, sparks fly. So I just encourage anyone who's watching,
absolutely
lean into that. And someone who knows you for a long time can tell when you're off. They can tell when you're going through something that's hard, and they can be there for you to help you get back up, get stronger. I think about in the Bible, characters that God used to strengthen each other, and how God designed community. Like, God designed us to do this together. So listen, if you've been watching the Paulcast more than one episode, please stay tuned for more stuff like this where we'll talk with different key leaders here in our church. I want to do another episode with my brother. Share this with a friend. Pass this episode along to other people. If there's things that you want us to talk about, let us know. Send us a message. Leave it in the comments.
Please.
We love you so much. God
We
bless
love
you. Have a
you.
great
See ya.
rest of your week.